Hello, everybody. It's me, Silent Eric. Today, we have some patch notes. Patch 4.10. And as you can see, there's a lot to go over. So let's go ahead and get started. A lot of changes for Standard, as well as some stuff for Path of Champions, which you know I like. If you've checked out my Twitch streams, you've seen me play that. Silent Eric on Twitch. So let's see. We're going to start off with some nerfs. Balin the Benevolent, the linchpin of the new formidable decks, now no longer buffs himself when he attacks, which is a pretty good change since he is a linchpin. He was buffing himself, and he was typically the target of their health granting buffs to keep him alive when you tried to remove him. So it is pretty nice to see this change. It'll make him a lot easier to deal with. Still not easy, especially with the inclusion of the new Freljord +1/+3 spell card. But even still, you should have a much easier time getting rid of Balin now. Especially when second Balin doesn't come in with a lot more health. Next up, the Epic Scrap Traption is the Runaway Scrap Trap, rather, the thing that Epic Scrap Traption makes, no longer has Brash, no more keyword. So you're not gonna be able to share Brash with all of your things anymore. But that was never the point. The big thing was that turn 3, you've saved up 6 mana, you get a 6/6 Brash, and that was very hard to deal with. Now it's just a 6/6, which can be chump blocked. It's still hard to deal with, but at least it can be chump blocked. Then we have the Hextech Handler. Now no longer grants Tech's extra health. Ooh. Okay. Yeah, this change should make the Heimer turret stay fragile, which gives the deck a much clearer weakness to pings. I really like that. Now Heimerdinger is the card that makes the turrets more durable. And you can use the Hextech Handler to make them more deadly, but that won't make them survive better. That is a very good change, and he himself got extra health to make up for that, so he's still pretty worth running. Just a 3/3 is pretty solid for 3 mana. You're not going to be too sad playing that, even if you haven't played a 6-cost card yet. Beguiling Cobra now is only when you play a follower. That is a shame. That is going to mess some of the combos up, such as Beguiling Cobra with Anaka or War Mothers or anything like that. Beguiling Cobra also won't work with Viego the same way, which is a shame. But it is what it is. It's still going to be strong. It still has a point, and you're still going to be able to do some interesting doubling of stuff, but you're not going to be able to kind of get it automatically at the start of a turn anymore. A shame, but it was the combos that was making this card a lot more difficult, even if this does hit some of the less good combos like the Viego one I mentioned. Next up, Swindle. It is, instead of manifesting, it's now pick one of two. Okay. So now you just get less information. You don't see as many cards. Um, I don't think this card was getting played that much, honestly, but it's probably a good change. Yeah, sure. You see less cards with it now. It's mostly just an information nerf, it appears. Less likely to see good stuff with it. It's just overall a nerf to it. Flare, the thing that Samira generates, now is 2 mana. Oof. So you can no longer skip turn 1, turn 2, play Samira, and give Samira Challenger all at once. The turn 2 Samira swing has to be done completely blind, I guess, without the ability to challenge specific things. But if you're attacking on odds, you definitely don't have to care about that, because you can play Samira on turn 2 or 3, and then Flare on turn 3. Flare being the free card that you get, and one of the ones that you kind of just cast multiple times. It is now much more expensive to level up Samira. And Samira now lowers the cost of Flare, so if you play Samira on turn 2 and just open attack, then you'll have a 1-cost Flare instead of a 2-cost Flare, which is nice. And then Samira level 2 still makes 2-cost Flares, but reduces the cost by a full 2. Oh no, that's a big nerf. Because since Samira level 2 no longer makes free flares, that means that you can't stock multiple flares in your hand with Samira level 2 anymore. Ooh, that is actually a little bit rough. That's going to make Samira feel a lot worse to play. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that level 2 Samira thing. It's still really strong, the rally, so you might not need to care, but it's going to be a lot more difficult, and the flare side of things is going to be less consistent. Pike. Ooh. Ooh, I don't like this one. Uh, Death from below going up to 5 cost. I could see that, sure, but or increasing the cost of normal Pike too, like just hard playing a Pike on the field. I kind of feel like they should have only raised the cost of Death from below, because Pike's surprise appearance is not just playing a Pike open on the field for everyone to see. And his stats are already so low that having to hard play him is already a big ask. So I do not like this change. The Death from Below one I could kind of see. And if Lurk is doing some really strong numbers, I don't know how much Pike is the main culprit. So it kind of sucks to see Pike continually getting hit with nerfs to pay for Lurk's sins. But it is what it is, I suppose. Exalted Cloudwinder, less attack. Make sure. Yeah, that's gonna make it a lot easier to block. A 2/2 with quick attack, a lot less dangerous, I would say. So, yeah, it still does all the things you want it to do. It's just less good at attacking. That's fine. Janna's usually winning off of some other strengths. Warden of the Tribes. The cost goes up by 1. It's still doing very strong. It still has Overwhelm itself. It still buffs itself. It's still just really, really strong. Big game ender. And I think it'll continue to be. So, Wildfire. 2 mana. Oof. Ouch. Okay. Well, 2 mana for 1 damage is terrible. But then 2 for 2 damage, 2 for 3, 2 for 4. It still gets better and better. It still becomes a better Decimate. But you're having to pay more each time. Now you're a lot more fine running this if you had some kind of created card, any kind of cost reduction or mana generation, spell mana generation specifically. You are a lot more fine with this Wildfire. But the math has certainly been thrown off for combo decks, such as Smuggler's Den or running it with Ionia. So it's taken a big hit. You're probably going to see a lot less of Wildfire, but I think it still does its job, and you can still make a dedicated deck that uses this as maybe not a full-on win condition anymore, but at the very least a finisher, which I think is supposed to be more of its job. Watchful Idol. Still doing 2 damage to itself, but has 1 attack, so it's going to survive less long without any kind of buff. I think this is probably the right change. I've heard people say lowering its health even more, but making it only do 1 damage at a time. But that makes giving it tough very dangerous proposition. So I think this has always had to be the right call, although it is very it's 1 mana for a 2/2 overtime instead of 1 mana for a 3/3 overtime, but it's still generating a unit every turn, if as long as it dies. So I think it's still completely valid to play. It's just going to be a lot less good now. Sting Officer, 2/1 to 1/2. So showing up as an offensive force in elusive aggro decks. Yeah, it's less good at being an aggro tool, that's sure, but I would argue that if you want to place flash bombs, it not dying to pings is a big boost, because if you care about flash bombs as a control tool, then that extra 1 damage was nice, but you'd rather your Sting Officer, your 2 mana Sting Officer, not just get hit by a pie. So I really like this change. I'm very happy with this. I'm probably going to put together some kind of flash bomb deck to make use of the change. Valley of Imitation now costs 4 mana. Combined with Chief Nakotok, Big Game Tycoon, the Valley hasn't only been imitating, but surpassing the units it's copying. They're wanting to slow it down a little bit. Yeah, so before you could do Valley on 3, Chief on 4, and that's going to be a lot more difficult to pull off now. It still kind of fits into the Big Game Tycoon side of things. You're not going to care about that. Like that still will fit into the curve. But the Chief Nakotok part, if you're having to wait to play your Chief Nakotok, that kind of sucks. But I don't think you're. I think you'll still be fine. I think the deck will still work. It'll just be less quick. As for the deck that I'm using Valley with, using it with the Churians, it is not great that it costs 4 now. You have to play it on 4, and then as long as they don't have landmark removal, I could play the unit for 2. So I could play it same turn on 6 instead of turn 5. Or I can set it up for a turn 5 play if I play it lose a whole turn playing it on turn 4. But it is a very good way to just level up, transform the Churians. So I still like it, but that deck is going to be a lot worse now, which is a shame. Next up, the Innovative Blacksmith. We love innovation. Blacksmith was a bit too good at her job. Should now play less pressure. Yeah, because it's still improvising. It's still getting a unit. So now it's gonna actually be like more of a 2/2 or a 3/2 instead of a 4/2. Which I think is still perfectly fine because it has that extra like backline effect of healing your Nexus. So now you can be less cavalier about being offensive with it, but you still can. It's still those aren't like dump stats or anything. And it nerfed offense of it, not the defense of it, so it's still just as hard to kill. Omen Hawk, a buff. So we finally get out of the nerfs and into the buffs. Freljord has struggled against elusives, especially more mid-range style Freljord decks that don't want to run Avalanche. So Omen Hawk, giving them a small roadblock to elusive attackers, will help them stabilize and make the matchup less polarizing. Teemo, look out. That Hawk is coming right for you. Yeah, just a straight up buff of being able to block elusives. Omen Hawk, if it wasn't close to an auto include before, there's no reason not to put Omen Hawks in your deck, I think. Children of the Forest goes from 8 mana slow to 2 mana fast. Recall an ally, or spend 8 mana to do the other thing. And that means that you can at fast summon ephemeral copies instead of it being a slow spell. How often how often is that going to matter though? The fact that you can summon units at fast. That's not going to matter when you're being attacked. That that's not going to matter when they're playing a board wipe because you don't want to summon in response to a board wipe and just have your summons die. The only way that matters is if they are doing something that targets the strongest that's happening at fast or slow, then you can use this to make your strongest and yeah. I don't think that's that impactful. The fact that it's fast instead of slow. I guess yeah, it's gonna cost 8 mana, so you can't stack 2 of it or anything. The biggest thing I think out of it going from to 2 mana is that this can now get generated by Seraphine if you're doing a Seraphine Ionia deck, which is certainly interesting. That's giving you a recall, and that's probably all you would use that for. I don't think you're going to do the 8 mana cost version for Seraphine. And yeah, I mean, overall, on its own merit, I think this is a good change. It gives you might actually want to run more than one copy of the card in your deck. You're probably running 0, but if you're doing some kind of recall deck, then you can actually run this because it will, recall an ally. Also, if it's generated by a karma or whatever, you feel less bad because it can, at the very least, be used to recall your karma or linchpin unit if they try to use removal. So this is a very good change. I think this is it's a huge change that makes this way more playable. I don't think it's going to get played that often, but that's pretty cool. Lord Eldred. Other allies in your Nexus have tough, and when an ally survives damage, grant +1/+1. That is pretty big. Okay, so Lord Eldred is a Titanic unit. Lord Eldred costs 8, so both. I've run Lysandra Eldred before. Eldred in Freljord has always just kind of made sense. And now any kind of self-harm stuff you do an avalanche, you're running it with, I don't know, Noxus, uh, for some reason, with the Crimson package. Lord Eldred is going to actually have the same effect as the landmark. Way later in the game, so it's not a replacement for the landmark. But it would go in the same kinds of decks, but it's in Demacia, so you can kind of shake up what the region combinations are. I think that is a really cool change. Lord Eldred, I think especially in Freljord, is going to see a good amount of play. And then I think he'd also probably work with dragons. Dragons tend to survive and then get bigger. Now they get bigger even more, and they all get tough. Lord Eldridge with dragons, I think it might be if not, maybe just a one of include, and you'd feel pretty good about it. Next up, the King's Court. Old, when you summon an ally, fleeting. Prize fight, when an ally survives damage, granted brash. New, all those same things, but it draws a Jack. Jack has been lagging a bit lately, but worry not, he's finally returned back to his boat. His boat finally summons Jack. Let's go, consistency. Now you can actually run King's Court and actually get a Jack. Jack already synergized pretty well with King's Court, especially once he got regeneration, or rather, pseudo regeneration. Is it a ship or a boat? Why isn't King's Court a submarine? Well, I mean, the thing that summons Yasuo is not a boat, and the thing that summons Jarvan is also not a boat. So not everything is a boat that summons. I mean, in Bilgewater it is. In Bilgewater it is, and this is definitely his ship slash boat. So it just makes sense. It really should have drawn Jack. I believe they said on Twitter before that the reason why it didn't before was because of the text, and that is 5 lines of text, 3 separate effects. That is a lot on this one card, but it just really should. So, Knuckle, unchanged. Mako, loses Overwhelm but gains Brash. Bull, loses Brash, gets +1 attack and Overwhelm. This is, I think, this is a pretty good change. Mostly you played Bull for the rally, not for the Brash. Now you're playing Bull for the big rally and Overwhelm. Bull is now really dangerous on his own. Mako less dangerous, but a 4/4 Overwhelm was kind of not as good. You're maybe better off with Brash, especially if you're actually running a kind of Jack Brash Matters deck. You'd like to get that Brash earlier for 6 mana rather than needing to do the full rally combo before you see Brash, at which point the Brash, once again, just kind of didn't matter. Okay, Wrath of the Freljord. On play, frostbites an enemy now. That is pretty nice. With Volibear giving support to Titanic units, we want to support some of the underplayed Titanic friends. So yeah, the Iron Boar now actually has an enter play effect, which is really nice. Enemies with 3 or less power can't block is already really good, but frostbiting an enemy just to cement it, as well as being able to do that on an offensive or on a defensive turn, makes the Wrath of the Freljord a lot more tempting to play, I think. I think you might actually start seeing this guy, and people are not going to be ready for that 3 or less power thing. That is going to throw some people way off. Shark Trainer. When allies attack, spend 1 spell mana to summon. Now no longer costs a spell mana. Just when allies attack, you get a Short Tooth. This is now a 7 mana Azir that gives you something with Overwhelm instead. Yeah. The penalty was outsized for its benefit, I'd agree. It led to accidentally not getting a shark more often than it led to interesting gameplay. Because of the fact that it costs spell mana specifically instead of just a mana. So, just if you didn't bank spell mana, then you didn't get your thing, which was annoying. So, it also meant that, like, you couldn't play any spells before attacking, or you couldn't play too expensive of a spell before attacking, or else you'd lose out on your shark. So this is, I think, a very big change for Shark Trainer. I'm not sure how often people are going to be playing for a 7 mana thing. I think Tristana will be very happy to have a unit that is less troublesome that you can actually just play and start getting advantage from. Also, I don't think Short Tooth has a arc type, right? Archetypeless. So I don't think. I mean, although this is a Yordle, I don't think it's summoning something that Nico will care about. But that's fine. Next up, Metal Babs. We are, I think, almost through. There's still a decent bit more. Metal Babs still costs 2 mana. Now has 1 less attack, but has a tune, which will give it the 1 attack. So basically, this costs like about half a mana less. Getting a tune, it still costs. You can't play it on turn 1, so it doesn't cost 1 mana less. You play it on turn 2, but you get a mana back, and that's going to immediately give you an attack. And then you can play Metal Babs and spend a coin. I think this is pretty solid. This is pretty solid. It kind of gets you rolling. You'll feel a lot better about it. Having that 1 spell mana can really come in handy. So I like that change. Wings of the Cryo Phoenix, 7 mana, deal 3 to all units, is now deal 3 to all units, and when you're enlightened, deal 3 to all enemies, not all units. That is huge, especially for Karma. You will no longer. This will now turn into a 6 damage enemy board wipe rather than something that will kill your own Karma. So that is going to be really big. I'm definitely going to move that into my Karma deck because that is going to. That's just going to work really well with Karma. Oh, I really like that change. That's so good for Karma. Uh, Thematically, I think it also fits Anivia, who only hits one side of the board, not both. So I kind of like that. Harrowing Return revives the strongest dead allied follower, grant it ephemeral and fearsome, and then debuff enemies. So it now grants fearsome instead of just ephemeral. So it always worked better with fearsomes because of the enemy debuff, but now it just kind of guarantees that you'll have at least one fearsome. I like that change. It far too often brought back a big threat that would just get chump blocked. Now that Big Spooky Zombie is a little fearsome to do a better job of actually closing out the game. I like that. I think this can get experimented around with. We haven't really seen a whole lot of Harrowing Return, but I do like that change. Zondiva got one extra attack. Oh, by making it Titanic. True, true. That's Titanic now. Is that gonna matter? I guess if you're doing an elemental P and Z deck, I guess it would. As long as you're playing a bunch of different elemental spells, then you'll hit Zondiva's effect. Zondiva will be an elemental, or will be a Titanic, so it can come out cheaper. That's an interesting change. I'm not sure how much it's going to see play, at least not from this patch, but I kind of like it. Then we get the Generous Gem Crafter. Powerful effect, but the immediate impact on the board was too low to justify it. One extra attack. I mean, I found the Gem Crafter to be really good already with my Yumi Yumi Kale pseudo elusive. Was it Yumi Kale or was it Yumi? I think it had maybe one Kale. I definitely had Mahira. It might have been Fizz. I think it was Yumi Fizz. Yeah, it was Yumi Fizz, and Generous Gemcrafter had put in a lot of work in that deck. So this is just a nice buff for him. For a, I think, an underutilized gem of a card. Anyway, let's move on. RA levels up quicker. One less card you need to level up. That is really nice because the level up is very powerful, very solid. Okay. Yeah. Want Recall to have a place as a competitive deck. So between this and the spell, putting together a new and improved Recall deck could be pretty fun. So we'll have to take a look at that. I like this change. RA on the level up is very strong. Teemo level 2 now plants a minimum of 5 puff caps. Very nice. This is probably mostly a Path of Champions change, but it also affects things like Howling Abyss. There are times where you would just be given a level 2 Teemo, and or no, there still is a thing that does that. It's the Shreeman one, right? That makes level 2s. So yeah, now you get a Teemo, and it's more than just a 1-mana 2/2 elusive. It will do something at least when it hits. Otacon. Okay. Now revives the strongest dead ally, which can definitely combo with a Scion deck. So that's kind of cool. Because reviving a Scion is going to be pretty devastating. Plus the Overwhelm and that actual effect, it is pretty game ending. With Titanic units on the rise, we want Otacon to feel like a reasonable option. Oh, and when he shows up from Clash of Titans. Oh, when he shows up from Clash of Titans, he doesn't get the play effect though. He still just gets the attack. Yeah, the change isn't going to make him feel any different when he shows up from Clash of Titans. That's a play effect. So I don't think that's gonna matter. But yeah, if you're actually wanting to run Atacon in your deck, that is going to be pretty solid. I like that a lot. Consult the Heavens as a change. It's always a risky card because of how suddenly it could end a game. That kept it from being a reasonable cost. By moving it to slow, we can give it power other ways. So it used to be focus, so you could just surprise someone with it. Now it's slow, people will see it coming, people can react. But it still fully heals, so if you don't finish off a unit, it's not going to matter. And it will grow their power equal to their health. It's a finisher for Soraka, but Soraka's not in standard, I don't think. So, trying to find a place where this belongs could be a bit of a challenge. But just look around and see where do you have things that have more health than they have power and uh, reasonable costs so that you can get a bunch of them out. Possibly just Bubble Bear. Maybe this is some kind of thing you run with a Bubble Bear deck. Could be interesting. Then we get the Savage Reckoner, now an 8/5, so it is now a Titanic. Yeah, just they're looking for things to make Titanic to fit in with the synergies with Volibear. Yeah, Savage Reckoner coming in with that, I think is pretty good. I mean, Challenger, very high attack with Challenger and Overwhelm is a great combination. And it has 5 health now too, so it got a full +1/+1. That's pretty big, honestly. That that makes it a serious consideration. Tusk Raider now has 8 health, just so that it can be Titanic. Sure, nice change. Liminal Guardian is now 4/2. Okay, yeah, that makes it a more dangerous burst blocker, because it's a thing that comes out of the 9 lives burst spell. That makes it a pretty good burst blocker at that point. The best one that's available in the game. Okay, like that change. Singular Will goes down to 9 mana. It's a huge effect, but was it really worth double-digit mana? We want this to be difficult, just not impossible. Yeah, because you're left with a unit, but you're passing priority to the opponent. So, unless you had a big enough unit that's going to end the game, you're both going to be able to just start refilling the board. Haunted Tomb asks a lot of you, both a dead unit and waiting for countdown, so making it just cost 2 to play instead. That is a nice change. You're not going to... do you want to play it on 2? That means that at most you're just going to have a 3 drop that died, which is not that crazy. I think it's just nice to make it playable, but that doesn't mean you're going to play it any sooner, I don't think. Brash Gambler gains Brash. Now that is just, I mean, it just makes sense. I don't think that's going to make Brash get played, but maybe it will. Maybe if you're... You know what, actually? If you're running a Neela Jack deck, which I have found to be very fun, Brash Gambler fits into that deck really well now. So in a Jack Neela, like prize fight kind of Brash Matters deck, Brash Gambler makes a lot more sense to play. Because the 4 mana 4/5 is really good stats. It's just that cost of discarding. Exhaust is burst speed. Hey! That is a very cheap burst speed weakness. Shurima got a very nice buff from this. Exhaust, I think, is going to see a bit more play thanks to that change. It's still not quicksand in terms of its getting rid of full-on keywords from up to 2 units. But for 1 mana, it's now going to be more than just an offensive tool. Although it's still better at being an offensive tool because of the vulnerable. Noble Revel. Noble Rebel. This now loses Overwhelm but gains Challenger. It still becomes a 5/3 once you've discarded enough cards, which is pretty solid for a Challenger. I'll be able to get rid of a lot of things. But even just a 3 mana 3/2 Challenger is pretty good. So in discard decks or even non-discard decks, I think you won't feel too led astray to play Noble Rebel. And a 5/3 is definitely a better stat line and can block compared to the 2 mana 5/1 Trifarian. So yeah, it's a good contender. I think you'll see this undead lady a bit more often. Flamecaller Caprine loses attack, gains health. Now way harder to get rid of, and she was already a bit of a monster if you don't get rid of her early. Very similar to the assembly bot in P and Z, but with tough. And also it counted as forge, so it worked with equipment a lot better. So this is a very strong chain that makes Flamecaller Caprine very scary and a lot harder to deal with right away, which you really want to do. Clockhand is now an 8/8. That means it's Titanic. Once again, more Titanic things. This time in Shurima. How often are you wanting to run this in a Titanic deck? Well, if you are actually trying to play Lysandra with Volibear, this now makes sense in that deck because you are either playing it for cheaper and helping unearth your landmarks, your frozen tomb, not frozen tomb, right? It's the frozen trolls, or you're hard casting it for 8, and then you're still getting more progress for Lysandra. So I think Clockhand in Lysandra Volibear might be what makes that deck make sense. That'll be worth looking into. So we'll have to try that out. Next up, the Berserker Urzine. Berserker. It is supposed to be a different way to play Sigil of the Storm, but it was too weak. Now he is a 6/4, harder to remove, much stronger, so scarier to not block. Although it's still kind of a backline unit, so I don't know how often you're going to be wanting to attack with it. When you play a spell, you play any spell or skill. Oh, it's not elemental. For some reason, I thought that was only elemental, but no, it cares about just anything. Okay, yeah, that'll make a lot of Sigils of the Storm then. Megatusk is now a 3/5. It's going to survive a bit longer if you play it before you're deep, which is really nice. And if they don't actually remove it, once you go deep, it heals 3, including itself. And therefore will be just a monster to deal with. That's a big buff for nerf, for deep actually. That's probably, if you want deep to be able to survive longer, this was the change to make. Just make sure you run Megatusk in your deep decks now. Kane's Shadow Step costs 3 mana. This is huge. If you attack on 5, this means that as long as you've played enough Cultists to have drawn a free Kane and drawn an actual Kane, you have 2 Kanes in your hand, turn 5, Kane's going to level up with 3 spell mana. That does sound like a lot to ask for, but it's going to happen a lot more often. I think you're going to be seeing Kane a bit more now, and Kane is pretty likely to have a second Kane in hand thanks to that free draw from his origin, and he's going to be able to level up right away, real quick, if you're not careful. Just make sure to Shadow Step first to give yourself quick attack for the turn, and then you're a lot more likely to survive the 2 attacks. Yordle Explorer is now a 2/3. That's pretty good. For something that was meant to buff other Yordles as they came in, he was not very survivable himself. Now he'll be able to survive to actually buff other Yordles a bit more. So I do like that change. Eclectic Collection costing 6. Oh my god, now that is a beautiful change. It was already a pretty strong card, but you're just waiting, biding your time, waiting for the perfect opportunity when you have a big board and you don't need to spend your mana to not die, and you can afford to play this, and then this will swing the game around, usually, but not all the time. 6 mana is a much easier pill to swallow. This is a very nice change for people that like to have fun with traps and boons, so really like that change. Adjustments. Portal Pioneer is a Yordle. It was a Yordle. Now it makes sense. Yeah. Uh, yeah. It's just a Yordle. It should be. Called shot is focus. That's pretty nice. It means you can kind of chain them. It means you don't have to pass priority when you play it. That is pretty good, actually. Yeah, just being able to draw that card at focus speed instead of slow is can be the big difference between finding an answer in time and not finding an answer. So I really like that change. That's a really good one. Then we have some new skins. Let's go ahead and take a little look-see. Underworld Twisted Fate. You may remember this guy from Actual League. He's got soul hands. He's got glowing cards. He's walking by a barbershop in a haunted Wild West town. He is not actually from High Noon. That's a different skin. And when you level up, he is fighting a bunch of basic Shadow Isles ghouls, which I think are not represented in cards yet. Like, we've seen them in cinematics, these kind of generic kind of ghouls, but there's no actual card for that. Looking pretty good, though. Looks like no change in level up or anything. But that's fine, because the Twisted Fate level up still looks really good. This is this the first time we've gotten a skin for an Eternal Champion? It might be. Alright, then we have Spooky Gangplank. This is not Ruined Gangplank. This is something else. This is like just a full-on ghost Gangplank. And there he is, spooking a bunch of people. Makes sense. And then we see him having sunk the ship and working with Naga Keboros. Is Spooky Gangplank affiliated with Naga Keboros somehow? That seems odd. He seems more like he is a Shadow Isles type person in this. Huh. I guess he's Naga Keboros aligned somehow. Alright. Then you can go ahead and buy a Voyage bundle, which will come with a very cool looking Aurelion Soul skin. Comes with some champion fragments, so you can actually play Aurelion Soul in the Path of Champions. You get a unique epic gauntlet, and you get 2 consumables. Alright. Starting November 1st. Okay, so and we have a full month before this Aurelion Soul is put into Path of Champions. But we know he's coming. Competitive stuff is coming up. Look forward to that. Aurelion Soul is being added as a 4-star champion. 1 more star than any other champion. Very interesting. And he's adding rewards to the monthly challenges. So he can only be unlocked from Aurelion Soul champion fragments. You cannot use wild fragments. His fragments can only be earned through monthly challenge rewards or if you buy this bundle. But you can still get them for free if you do the monthly challenge rewards, which is probably what I will be doing. Yeah. Rewards won't be honorable until November 1st. Then relics. So they added Starforged gauntlets, although you can just buy it with the bundle. And those are, if it's on a Titanic unit, +1 starting mana. And whenever you invoke or manifest, even if that your champion is not in play, you can find level 2 champions. That's pretty big. That's very strong. No wonder it's epic, so you can't actually equip it unless you use the Spirit Forge to upgrade a rare to a epic slot. The Greater Cosmic Pearl, an equipable relic that will give you a bunch of bonus experience. Okay. Huh. The level 2 champion will sometimes proc as a 4th option instead of replacing one of the 3 normal options. Interesting. Yeah. And then Aurelion Soul himself. At 1 star, when you play a created card, reduce the cost of allied champions everywhere by 1. When you play a champion, level them up. That's pretty big. So every champion you play is automatically level 2. When you play a created card, reduce the cost of allied champions everywhere by 1. So, okay, so you want to play created cards, and then you will be able to play champions for very cheap. Star power level 2, +1 starting mana, and all of your created cards get rare or epic items for free. That's very nice. Star power 3, when you play a created card, reduce the cost of allied champions everywhere by 2 instead of 1, and then your champions still level up. You're still welcome. And lastly, at 4, the newest thing, when you play a unit, double its stats, and if it's Aurelion Soul, the skies will descend, which is 15 damage, so Aurelion Soul comes down with an actual board wipe, and all units double their stats. Now, this seems like almost easy mode. If you actually get to 4 stars with Aurelion Soul, which is probably going to take quite a bit of grinding whatever this monthly challenge reward thing is, he's going to come down and be a monster. That's going to plow through almost any deck I think you run it up against. But it looks like it's still going to be kind of fun to play, because you're getting random things, you're wanting to create cards, you're still wanting to build your deck a different way than normal. You get 1,000 Stardust if you beat Aurelion Soul. If you've already done it, you'll get it in the mail. And if you haven't done it yet, first time you do it, you'll get it. And the legend level cap goes up to 50. Okay, so just more generic rewards. Okay, that's interesting. Post-match lobby has been changed so that you can look at people's decks once you've beaten or been defeated by them, as well as sending friend requests. It's now easier to get everything you need out of one whole deck. That's nice. Yep, buy all, so you can just get everything you're missing. And it spends wild cards, then green shards, and then coins if you run out of green shards. And then some bug issues. Anything important here? Cost reduction granted by found fortune would only last 1 round. Some kind of 30-second freeze on mobile users. Astral Radiance caused people not to level up, so Path of Champions change. Portal Pioneer now shows Yordle. Well, we saw that up above. Oracle's Eye now works a bit better with Nico. Sign stop stacking spells when spells were played. Impact text not stacking correctly. Sea Scarab was not getting deep stats buff during combat. The momentous choice change. Okay. The wrong amount of mana would be spent when momentous choice reduced itself by 1, and you had 2 or more. That was apparently a problem. Value of imitation transforming itself into the base copy of a unit rather than the exact copy. Okay. Did not have hover text indicating itself while transformed. Oh no! Now, I mean, that's good for you remembering it yourself, but now the opponent will be able to tell. I have actually done a thing where I've put enemies and shuffled them to make them try to forget which one was the valley. Fixing off an issue where Noxian Fervor wouldn't deal damage to your unit. Fix an issue where Condense would not trigger Spell Shield. Fix an issue where wild cards were not rewarded properly. Claim all. Off center. Okay. So the main mechanical change that we need to know about is the Value of Imitation thing. The 2 Value of Imitation things, actually. And the momentous choice change. Also, apparently, this Noxian Fervor thing. Ooh. And Condense. Ooh. Okay. All in all, these changes, and there are a lot of them, seem very nice. I really like them. Do you guys have anything you're looking forward to building? I think the Lysandra Volibear deck is an interesting experiment. We'll see how well that goes. Kayn, I think, is going to see a big resurgence. This is going to be a very scary card. We'll see how people try and do stuff with Scion, because there's a couple things that seem to work with Scion. Neela and Jack decks should work out pretty well, especially with the Boats edition as well as the Brash Gambler. Recall got several things: Ra's Singular Will, Liminal Guardian, and the change to Children of the Forest. A lot of changes there. So a Recall deck seems like it could be very fun to play. And Lord Eldred, I think we'll see a little bit more often. I think we're going to see Wrath of Freljord a bit more often. And Wings of the Cryo Phoenix is going to be devastating with Karma. This is going to be... Karma is still going to just rule the roost. And then for the nerfs, I'm not sure how much it's going to stop Warden of the Tribes or Formidable decks. I think those are still going to be strong, but they're definitely going to be less good. They're going to win less quickly. And you're going to get blown out less often by the Scrap Trap, which is very nice. So I really like all of these nerfs, other than the Pike one, and I think the Samira one also goes a little bit too far. But other than that, I think I like everything here, and I really don't consider the Sting Officer thing a nerf. I think that is a buff for running the Sting Officer for, as it says, its original job, planting flash bombs. But overall, let me know, what did you guys think? How do you like these new cards? How do you like all the changes? Anything you think they missed in terms of nerf that's going to still be a problem? Any kind of buff that you hope to see in the future? And I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to leave a like and a subscribe. Check me out on Twitch, Silent Eric on Twitch. You guys have a good one.